So, if you've arrived at this video, I will be assuming one of two things about you. You have recently been left with an empty void after finishing Edgerunners, or you have recently been left with an empty void after finishing your playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077. Listen, I get it. Everyone in the community has been there and shared this experience, oftentimes left scraping for more as we do rewatches of Edgerunners, or a second, third, or even fourth playthrough of 2077. If more Cyberpunk stories, adventures, and overall lore is what you crave, then you have come to the right place. Let's go ahead and hop into a quick history lesson. Firstly, you might only be familiar with 2077. Let's fix that. What you may not know is that the Cyberpunk series began in the ripe year of 1988. No, it wasn't some poorly done video game on the Sega Genesis. Rather, it didn't involve technology at all. Yeah, surprising for the Cyberpunk genre, right? It was a tabletop role-playing game. It all began with the first edition titled Cyberpunk 2013. This edition and all that followed were created methodically by Mike Pondsmith and his company, Artalzorian Games. You need but realize a singular thing about these sourcebooks. Not only do they share the title of Cyberpunk with 2077, they are the legitimate and canon predecessors to 2077. Well, that is, a majority of them are. As we enter this next portion of the video, the majority of Cyberpunk source and adventure books can be found for PDF or physical purchase on the official Artalzorian Games store or DriveThruRPG. Some may no longer be in print, so PDF may be required. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments down below. The Cyberpunk series is organized through core rulebooks, which, just like the name implies, are the core releases of Cyberpunk and act as the essential pillars that hold up the entirety of its releases. Think of these as the base games, while any books following between these releases would act in technicality as DLC, which are aptly named supplements. Looking at the canon roster of these core book releases, in order of release date we would have Cyberpunk 2013, Cyberpunk 2020, and Cyberpunk Red. Now, someone who has begun to look past this point might begin to get a little dazed and lost. Don't worry though, I'm here to fix that and structure these books in the most digestible and useful order to those who want the most bang for their buck. Cyberpunk 2013 had a multitude of supplements released for it, but not all of them are exactly necessary. The two of most value to you here are going to be the Rocker Boy and Solo of Fortune supplements. Rocker Boy is a fun book to start off on if you're a fan of Johnny Silverhand, for obvious reasons of course. This supplement primarily details the Rocker Boy and media rules, and the concept and history of braindance technology. This book accomplishes its in-universe style of writing through structuring itself as a magazine, covering topics such as Night City's clubs, bands, and trends, as well as icons such as Johnny Silverhand and Carrie Eurodyne. It even transcribes several interviews with many of the characters in Night City. Solo of Fortune, though, is somewhat more conservative in its intended audience, however, seeing as it goes into great detail on the subject of the Solo character class. The book is written in-universe and published by Fax Press and includes write-ups on subjects such as the first corporate war fought between EBM and Orbital Air, Solo specialization, and skill packages, as well as solos that are contracted by world governments, the equipment that they use from small arms and heavy vehicles. Also included is a small section on the status of the world outside of Night City, from Hong Kong to Mexico. With the introductory core book and supplements out of the way, we now enter the time period of Cyberpunk 2020 releases. 2020 happens to contain the bulk of lore within its core book and supplements. You'll be seeing events across Night City, America, and the rest of the world in deep detail that includes major historical periods, such as the Fourth Corporate War. While every sourcebook at the end of the day can be considered a great read for Cyberpunk fans, it can be extremely overwhelming to be entering this atmosphere from 2077. So these are the essentials you'll want to read after finishing up your core book readings. Now, this is a series of books as well as a complete collection of them all into a singular title. The Corporate Report 2020, volumes 1 through 3 will contain nearly every question you can have in relation to major corps, such as Arasaka, Militech, Biotechnica, and even less popular corps, like the mercenary organization titled Lazarus. In a world driven by the rule and unfair power of corporations, these volumes are an essential read. Following these supplements, it would be best to stay centralized in Night City, America, and connected events from other portions of the globe. These are the major supplements you'll need to read from 2020. Home of the Brave, which details the United States in the year 2020. The Night City Sourcebook, that acts as an expanded city guide for 2020, where you'll find its history. And Raish Bartmoss's Brainware Blowout alongside Raish Bartmoss's Guide to the Net. These two supplements act as guides from Raish Bartmoss in universe. They're dedicated to the net, its history, netrunners, hardware, software, and much more in relation to the global net. There are another two source/adventure books we need to discuss. This video very clearly would be incomplete without them. They're titled Firestorm Stormfront and Firestorm Shockwave. These two supplements cover the entirety of the Fourth Corporate War, including the Shadow War. It goes without saying that you'd be missing out on major lore implications skipping out on these books. Just to show you how important they are, they include Raish Bartmoss and Alt Cunningham interacting within the net to locate Arasaka's Soulkiller 2.5, Raish Bartmoss's death, and the Militech-led raid on Arasaka's Night City HQ that led to the Night City Holocaust and Time of Red. Don't miss out on these. And of course, any sourcebook detailing specific classes will have a lot of history involved. The rest of these being Edgerunners Inc., Live and Direct detailing Medias, Neo-Tribes detailing Nomads, Solo of Fortune 2 acting as a follow-up to the original, and Wildside detailing the role of Fixer. Keep in mind, it may seem like a lot of information and sourcebooks are on this list. However, in the grand scheme of the TTRPG, these are rather narrowed down to the bulk of information you'll want on Cyberpunk. Of course, specific questions and interests will require different books, but for an overall understanding of the Cyberpunk world, these are what you want to read. In relation to Cyberpunk Red, it's set in 2045 to bridge the gap between 2020 and 2077. While this clearly still leaves a gap from 2045 to 2077, it does the job it needed to do for Cyberpunk 2077 to have a clear progression from 2020. Since Red was only released on July 30th in 2019, it doesn't have many supplements to dive into. Of course, you can read them, but I find that unless you are actually running a Red campaign with a group, they shouldn't be a priority when it comes to the storytelling and world building of Cyberpunk. Now you've probably been wondering at the back of your head about the non-canon sourcebooks briefly mentioned earlier in this video. While there's been quite a catalog of sourcebooks converted out of canon, there's only really two that you need to know of: Cyber Generations and Cyberpunk version 3.0. Cyber Generations was originally meant to be the canon follow-up to Cyberpunk 2020. The issue with this edition was its astoundingly large jump from the atmosphere in 2020 to a world of cyber-evolved children with heroic motives and a superhero comic book atmosphere, making it feel like an X-Men cyberpunk fanfiction more than anything else. Though, there is a reason I bring this sourcebook into the big picture. We can practically use it to predict the events of Red in 2077. While I'll personally be delving into this subject in much more detail within a future video, you yourself might be able to do some research and piece together the upcoming plotlines. For you to use as points of interest, Alt Cunningham discovers she can only create a cloned personality to transfer into a clone, meaning that she remains stuck in the net, while the clone is capable of soul-killing Johnny Silverhand and bringing him back to life after his apparent death. Sound familiar? Get digging, Choom. Cyberpunk version 3.0 is a vastly different story. Released in 2005, version 3 was meant to act as a follow-up to the Firestorm series. It was met with mass disapproval from the fanbase, as it was a failure in living up to the expectations set by Firestorm Shockwave in its epilogue. Version 3 utilized an ugly black and green aesthetic, followed with the use of photographed toys to paint the pages rather than legitimate artwork. It was ugly to look at, to say the least. Parallel to the aesthetic, the world, stories, and overall writing seemed to lack a rhyme or rhythm in tune with previous editions. It utilized the idea of memes, alternative cultures, mermaids, conspiracy theories, hoaxes, and even rogue AI drones building a massive web of cities across America. There was obvious confusion from fans in relation to this sudden change of setting and style. It's an interesting piece of Cyberpunk's release history, but doesn't hold much value in the current Cyberpunk story, seeing as very few of the plot lines or details seem to be recycled for Red or 2077. Read it if you dare. So, there you have it. The information required to begin your research and education upon the vast world of Cyberpunk and its sourcebooks. It may not detail an explanation behind every event or character, as Cyberpunk heavily utilizes mystery and conspiracy within its plots, but it will give you everything you need. If you're looking to delve further into the many mysteries, lore, and even narrations of Cyberpunk 2077 and its predecessors, consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel to keep up to date. Thanks to everyone on screen for becoming a member. I appreciate all your continued support and hope you continue to enjoy my content. If you have any questions, information, or thoughts on the video, drop them down below in the comments. I always look forward to seeing what you all have to say. Stay safe and have a great week, chooms.